Mm. So I don't usually do videos like this, or even if I do, I don't. I'm not accustomed to doing them with any degree of frequency, and that is, for instance, speaking about figures in, say, the movie world who have passed away. Um, I'm not a. This is not a news channel, so I don't. This channel is not in any way meant to be a kind of covering of, say, recent movie news or cinema events of the sort. And also, there are so many of these. So many. I mean, unfortunately, a lot of there's news about people's passing, and so of course I have feelings of condolences and the like, but I don't go to making videos for the most part with regard to talking about, say, news about someone's passing. About that, so I don't usually do this I guess for the most part. There have been a couple of occasions where I have spoken about, say, certain, say, actors or filmmakers who have passed away, but I don't usually do that as maybe a regular thing. For instance, on this channel, it's not a news channel in that regard. I know other channels that do that very well and cover recent movie events or movie-related events, maybe industry-related news in the sort. But I don't do that. I'm not so good at covering points, and also I would feel bad if I was trying to have the channel be something where I'd be talking about that, or I'd be endeavoring to do that every time it occurred. But for instance, I missed someone. It's like those Oscar ceremony in memorandum clips where, I mean, no one did it on purpose, but you always have those instances where maybe a name was forgotten or someone was left out of such in memoriam montage. And so I don't want to I don't want to fall victim to that as well. Forgetting someone, or not making a video talking about this person who passed on or that person who passed away, etc. And so it gets into that kind of situation, which I'm not really good at handling. So I don't want to be in that position. So that's why I don't make it a thing to talk too much about uh, people in the movie industry, or artists who have passed away. But For the most part, anyway. But I would like to take this opportunity to speak about the recent passing of David Lynch. So I'm making this video. It's Sunday, January 19th, 2025. And a few days ago, there was the news about the David Lynch passing away, um, and last week. And so this came, I think, as a huge shock to a lot of people across, say, a cinema fandom and the industry, not just cinema circles, but also in other circles: art, literature, photography, music. And so this is a very this is a, you don't need me to say just how sad this news is, because I think David Lynch, in terms of his art and his expressions, really affected so many people. And I think it can be said with a certain degree of confidence that it's an artist like David Lynch is very, very rare, and it's almost like a once in a lifetime thing that you'll see an artist of the type and, say, quality and caliber that David Lynch was and is. Not to take anything away from any other of his contemporaries, and each artist has their own set of sensibilities and their own outputs and viewpoints and perspectives and means of expression, of course, each in their own valuable and glorious ways. So not to take anything away from any other artists of his generation. But I mean, I just have to say that David Lynch is sort of a one of a kind, and so it's it's uh, I'm saddened by the news of his passing, and it reminds me just how fortunate I can consider myself to say that I lived in a time where David Lynch was making his art, and I was able, in my own very limited and very distant way, I was able to, or I could say that I was able to live through this time. Because I consider myself very lucky in that regard. In other words, I am very fortunate to say that I was living during a time when David Lynch was making his art. So, and I was able to enjoy and to appreciate and to really soak in the greatness that was and is the art of David Lynch. So I mean, I never knew David Lynch, and so he never knew me, and I'm a nobody. I'm not anyone at all special, so I can't speak to David Lynch in terms of the man, the human being. Just what I hear as from my own vantage point, from sort of the consumer side of things. So. But I can't speak to those points, obviously. But what I can speak to are the ways in which his art and his works, specifically his films, short films and feature-length films, and various other projects that could be found here and there and everywhere, how they really affected me, and they left a kind of indelible mark or series of marks that I think are very unique and that I'm not sure, as I say, I'm not sure we'll ever get an artist quite like David Lynch. Again, I'm maybe I'll never, while I'm alive, I don't know if I'll ever see an artist quite like David Lynch, as I say. So maybe there might be another one of that caliber after I'm long gone from this world, but I don't know. It's I mean, what can I say that hasn't been said already? But I mean, it 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 sort of begins in a kind of netherworld for me. More so, not the film itself, but I just remember being privy to that image, the poster image of Jack Nance as Eraserhead, or not as Eraserhead, in Eraserhead, with his now iconic look in the hair and the black and white and the font of Eraserhead as a poster that I saw every time I entered into the local video store where I used to live in the United States in Connecticut, called the Roxy, and it had the poster right as you entered the door or entered the room. It was a kind of small space, but it had right near the entranceway. Every time I walked in, I'd see this to me this strange image of this person later I discovered to be Jack Nance. And I'd always think, oh gosh, Eraserhead, what is this movie? What is this? And then you kind of look at you can see the box of the VHS on the shelf, but do you go for it? Or did you go for something else? I was kind of hesitant at the time to go for it, but then I reached for it as a rental when I was very young. I thought it was going to be a horror film when they first put it in, and then I put it in and I watched, and I must admit I was like, what the heck am I watching? And it kind of grew from there. I mean, this was around the early to mid '80s, and it's now the time that I was very, very young, 6, 7, something like that, and maybe younger, perhaps. I'm not sure. Around the mid '80s. I was born in 1979, so but this was around the time too that Dune was around, The Elephant Man was around on VHS, Blue Velvet was starting to make the rounds on the VHS rental circuit, in a manner of speaking. But I did watch also The Elephant Man on VHS. It could have been television, I forget. But and then Dune was also on the horizon, but that was also something that was very inscrutable from my perspective. I had no idea what was going on with regard to my watch of Dune in the early 80s when I was but a wee lad. But I would say of the bunch, and I didn't see Blue Velvet yet, but I would say of the bunch, you had the film The Elephant Man that really I felt a huge weight of sadness every time I know I saw that even as a young boy. I can't claim to have known and understood everything that was going on in that film, but at the time or even now, but I could remember feeling this huge weight of sadness. But it wasn't a thing to be avoided, or it wasn't something to feel ashamed about, but it was something almost uh, kind of graceful and beautiful in its own sense of graceful nobility, or grace, I should say, that really led me, on instinct, maybe think. I mean, I couldn't articulate it in words at the time. Again, in the mid-age when I'm however old I am, 6, 7, 8 or something. But you can always sense this feeling of sadness that's also in its own way kind of liberating. So it kind of grew from there. And then I would say that I moved around a bit. My discovery of Blue Velvet came a little bit later. But and also this was around the time that you had things like Twin Peaks, his collaboration with Mark Frost, and then you had Wild at Heart coming around a little bit later. But it was around this time and my discovery of David Lynch works, and then Twin Peaks, it wasn't a chronological thing, but it grew sort of organically based on my own, say, cinema journey at the time. I discovered Twin Peaks a little bit later, but I was still fairly young. I discovered Blue Velvet maybe in my pre-teens or early teenage years. Wild at Heart, the same thing, but all on sort of VHS or the like. Twin Peaks, I couldn't watch while it was broadcast, but I watched here and there. But I wasn't able to solidify my viewing of Twin Peaks, until I was able to watch it on kind of VHS tapes. That I had a set of VHS tapes. I couldn't. You had to get the pilot elsewhere on a separate set or separate release. But if you get the pilot on its own separate, which is actually what they call the feature length version of the pilot. Was made for, I think, outside North American markets, but that was basically the blueprint of the pilot. You get a gist of what was going on, kind of also into episodes 2 and 3 of the first season. But that was my entry point into Twin Peaks all the way through to the end of season 1 and then into season 2. And then along the way, I'd be watching on VHS as rentals, things like Wild at Heart and then Blue Velvet, not quite getting the gist of what was going on upon first viewing, but it didn't matter because it was inviting you. The films were always inviting you to watch the films over and over and over again. I should point out that until I'd seen Blue Velvet, I wasn't really having things like Roy Orbison register on my musical radar. I'm very limited in terms of my own, say, musical radar. But when I saw Blue Velvet, as perplexed and as confused as I was upon first viewing, and I admit I was very perplexed and very confused, I would still manage to say that I fell in love with the world of Roy Orbison, and my life was all the better for it, I think. So, but in any event, this is around the time that Roy Orbison had released I think it was his final huge hit, which was called "You Got It," and I didn't realize it was kind of a neat little connection for me to think, oh, the person who sang "You Got It" is the same person who sings "In Dreams," which is a huge deal. And that's around the time too when I think Pretty Woman was also being released in theaters. So it was all coming together in sort of Roy Orbison renaissance, the Roy Orbisnaissance. And then but I think my discovery around the time of Blue Velvet, granted it was a film that was released, a few years earlier in the late 80s, but still, my watch of it has sealed the deal in terms of my Roy Orbison love. But yes, so this was around the time. Yes, it was around this period that it became this huge deal. But it was always going to be like a VHS rental affair, and it wasn't until films that. It wasn't until like Lost Highway and The Straight Story that I was able then to watch David Lynch movies in the movie theater upon initial release. And so this was great eye-opening. Oh, also Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, which is also VHS rental affair. And well, I'll get to Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me in a moment, but uh, again, up to Lost Highway, I wasn't able to watch David Lynch movies in the theater upon initial release. But things changed with Lost Highway, and then I just went, Lost Highway and The Straight Story and Mulholland Drive and then Inland Empire. They became cinema going experiences for me. And I must say that I was shocked when I saw Lost Highway in the theater. I was shocked when I saw The Straight Story in the theater. And I was shocked when I saw Mulholland Drive in the theater. And I was shocked when I saw Inland Empire in the theater. I saw Inland Empire, I think, 2 or 3 times at the one of the movie theaters, the IFC or something. Is that the name of it in downtown New York? What a great movie going experience that was. There were moments there where the crowd was just jumping out of sheer fright at some of the scenes. It was really amazing. And if you know Inland Empire, you know there are some real shocking, scary moments in that film that are like among the great like jump scare moments in any film that you'll ever see. And then I remember, for instance, Lost Highway, which is very has a lot of I mean it has this great sense of like oily, slick sleaze to it. Which is again part of the milieu of the film, and voyeurism and sex as mystery, and also hidden agendas and mistaken identities, things of the sort, as well as great performances by Bill Pullman, Patricia Arquette, Robert Loggia, Richard Pryor, Jack Nance. I like that. And then you get The Straight Story, which is in many ways a kind of complete 180 to Lost Highway, but also in many terms very much consistent with Lost Highway. And I remember the time that was released, people were really shocked by The Straight Story being, is this a Disney film that's a David Lynch film? But it was, and it is. It's a David Lynch film through and through. I'm sorry. I realize I'm just going all over the place, not really much thought to what it is I'm saying. I apologize. I guess it's just the nature of the beast for me, and so I apologize for that. But let me try to wrap this up in some kind of meaningful way if I can. But I suppose I can say too that when I heard the news of David Lynch's passing, I went ahead and I didn't put any films of his in the player, but rather I was just listening to some music, like a lot of Roy Orbison, a lot of Twin Peaks music, Sycamore Trees, Ghosts of Love, Angelo Badalamenti stuff, Roy Orbison stuff, Blue Velvet. Just listening to that a lot, the soundtrack of his works and his TV works, etc. And then I played going back to Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me. I played one of my favorite tracks from the soundtrack, or any soundtrack I should say, is The Voice of Love. And I thought, oh my goodness, The Voice of Love, this has so much meaning now. And it brought me to I was just thinking, it just brought me to a place of, again, just thinking back on the works of Lynch. There have been so many, from the short films and Dumbland and some of his later adventures in, say, Netflix stuff. But, just going back, Duran Duran, and I was just going back and thinking about all these things, like On the Air and just like Alphabet and just things of everything, and going back and forth, and then just going back to thinking about The Voice of Love, and then its association with Twin Peaks and its association with Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me. I was just thinking, my goodness, what a gold mine, what a real treasure trove of cinematic works. just going back and thinking just how much his films and his works meant to me in terms of my own cinema journey. Um, I spoke a little bit about it at the top here, but um, uh, you know, I, uh, I mean, it's really quite something. It's really quite amazing to think just how profoundly affected I have been and continue to be by his works. Just moments here and there, or in a lot of places, just really resonate. Like, um, I can give you examples of film moments, or bits of dialogue or lines or just little things that happen all the way, sprinkled throughout the whole resume of his body of work, from Eraserhead and all the way up to Inland Empire. And I've seen them countless of times, not claiming to understand what the heck is going on in any of them, but just really wonderful and resonant all the same. It's just a wonderful guide, one of the great guides of anyone's cinema journey, I would say, is going through the works of David Lynch. And what's so great about him, he's totally unforgiving, unflinching, doesn't cave to any kind of sort of outward pressure. He is what he is. And David Lynch films, I know, maybe aren't to everyone's tastes, and maybe some of the subject matter might be of not everyone's cup of tea. Maybe to some might be quite upsetting, disturbing, maybe even distressing, maybe even offensive. But that doesn't. I don't think that's the point of Lynch films, in order to sort of find a kind of, let me put it this way. I mean, Lynch films are Lynch films. I don't go into a Lynch film trying to find necessarily a kind of a moral compass for how I should live my life, or any kind of political message or anything of the sort. But I look for something that is a sort of insight into how, somehow or another, a way of viewing the world that is way different from how I view the world. But in that recognition, somehow or another, maybe creating some kind of realization, a thing that happens. So, and in that way, I find that all of his works, and he had many collaborators that he worked with in conjunction with this, and his body of work that he did together with working with so many great people. Some of them maybe one-off, and others maybe more. They had multiple interactions with each other. So you name the list. So many collaborators that he worked with. Alan Splett, or Jack Fisk, or Sissy Spacek, or Angelo Badalamenti, or Mark Frost, and the list goes on, and Mary Sweeney, and the list goes on and on and on. Not to mention, of course, the people in front of the camera, a lot of people that he collaborated with, the actors that he worked with a lot, or very memorably. I mentioned a little bit here and there, like Jack Nance, or Naomi Watts, or I mentioned Richard Pryor, and also John Hurt, Anthony Hopkins, and Kyle MacLachlan, and Laura Dern, and others. I mean, it's and on and on and on. Of course, they all came together and to create these sort of summits of cinematic excellence that are just, or just artistic excellence, that I think are just a one of a kind, unique experience. So, in just traversing through the terrain of David Lynch works, it's hard to pinpoint which ones are my favorites and which ones are my special favorites. I try to hesitate doing that. It's hard to make lists for me, because it's just hard. I can't do it. And on any given day, I'll totally maybe just lose myself in trying to figure out something, because I just can't come to a definitive conclusion, because it's so hard, because every film, I think, has its own special place. It really does. I think every film has its own special place. But I mean, if I had to pick one film that to this very day, I think, just stirs me, and I say they all stir me in their own special way. But I have to go back to say it could be perhaps for me in many ways the ultimate David Lynch film for me. And it's paradoxical because you can't watch this film without watching basically a whole TV series prior to it. And I'm referring to the film which is Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me. Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me is in many ways almost like it's almost the perfect David Lynch film. It's the perfect David Lynch film because it's so contradictory to itself. I mean, it's a standalone film, but you need to have the basis of watching Twin Peaks beforehand. But it's interesting in terms of the chronology. So you can kind of watch it on its own, but you kind of need to watch Twin Peaks. It's one of those things where it fits into that netherworld that we were talking about before. It negates itself, positive energy and negative energy. I love it. And it has so many ripples and mysteries that I think are purely iconic Lynch stuff. Totally iconic Lynch stuff. Some of the most iconic Lynch stuff imaginable. I even love the soundtrack, how contradictory the soundtrack is. I mean, the soundtrack has a song, Jimmy Scott's Sycamore Trees, that doesn't even appear in the film. So it's great. It's absolutely great. But I mean, in any direct context, I mean, the melody does. But anyway, the sung version I'm talking about. And then it seems to exist in its own place, but then it has its missing pieces, which also add things, but also create even more mysteries, which I love, absolutely love. So in many ways, I think Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me could be almost maybe for me my perfect Lynch film, maybe my ultimate favorite Lynch film. And there are, if I had to pick the greatest Lynch film ever made, it's impossible for me. You could pick, work like Eraserhead as being the greatest Lynch film, or you could pick a film like Mulholland Drive as being the greatest, or Blue Velvet as being the greatest Lynch film. Inland Empire, I think, is the greatest Lynch. Wild at Heart, Dune, I think, is one of the greats. The Elephant Man. But if I had to pick for me, what is like the ultimate, or it's a straight story, right? Or if I had to pick the ultimate, a perfect film, it might have to be Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me. Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, I think, for me, is sort of the stuff of legend. Yeah. Right, I can't do it anymore. But what is it? I mean, I'll try not to spoil Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, but for anyone who hasn't seen that great film, but I've done a number of the scenes on the YouTube Shorts there. Electricity, right? Or fellow victim. With this ring, I thee wed. Yeah. Oh, believe me, I've. Or yeah. He's gone. He's gone. I'll take that second mineral water. All right. I'm losing it here. I'm sorry. But anyway, yeah. And maybe I should maybe point out too. I mean, I mentioned that Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me. I just also want to mention to just shout out to the Straight Story. I don't want to go into particulars, but maybe I don't go into details specifically, but in the last 2 minutes of Straight Story. Really, I think, have come home now, especially given the recent news of David Lynch's passing. And then also Bucky in Inland Empire, and Power Man, and then Gosh, any quote from any line in any scene in Twin Peaks, and that includes the Twin Peaks Return series. But let me say this: um, "May the road rise up to meet your wheels, Mr. Lynch." And then also to uh, it's I mean, I can't swear too much, but Pabst Blue Ribbon. Um, Long live the fighters. I am a human being. And I mean, there's so many quotes to pick, but maybe one of the most maybe poignant, perhaps, might be found all the way at the beginning, at least in terms of the feature film works of David Lynch, right? Given all that's been happening, you find it, you go all the way back to where you started from, which in many ways is the perfect Wizard of Oz message, which is so very Lynchian if you think about Wild at Heart and other things. But, there's no place like home, or going back to where you started. And for Lynch and his filmography, you have to go to Eraserhead, and you think, in heaven everything is fine. So, my goodness, what a journey this has been. And I didn't even mention, other like just other moments and fragments and memories. Lost Highway. I mean, there's some great quotes from Lost Highway. I can't say because I don't like to swear, but there's one. Yeah, well, there's a number of them in Lost Highway that I absolutely adore, but I won't say because I want to preserve my rule of not swearing on camera. But there are a lot of those there. But in any event, Lost Highway too. But yeah, let me end here with saying, in heaven everything is fine. And so to the memory of and the great legacy of cinematic legacy and the artistic legacy of David Lynch. Here is my very inartful approach to just expressing just a little bit of how I feel right now in terms of what his works have meant to me and continue to mean to me going forward for what I hope is many years to come. But as I say, I am so fortunate to say that I lived during a time that David Lynch was alive making his art. And I will forever cherish those cinematic journey memories to my own dying days. And as I say, yes, and maybe at that moment too, I will maybe look to words of wisdom from the pool of art that is the body of work of David Lynch. And I too might say, perhaps, maybe, who knows, hopefully, yes, for me too, in heaven, everything is fine. So thank you, kudos, and my deepest gratitude. I am but one of many, many voices expressing their admiration for the artist, Mr. David Lynch.